Howdy, howdy! Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Paramotor Podcast. Today, I am super happy to have both of my friends here, David Nickerson and Emily Dziedzic. They are the owners of You Can Fly PPG, and they happen to be on an incredible tour all the way from the Northeast New England area, all the way to the west at Salton Sea. And on your way back, you decided to stop by in the studio and grace me with your presence. I'm really excited to see you guys. It's been what, like
2 years?
2 years. 2 years. You brought your puppers with you.
You brought a new human into the world.
That's right. That's right. Whoops. Uh-oh.
She's adorable, man.
She was on the inside last time.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, Leandro was preggers.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's great to be back.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you very much for coming here in your incredible bus. Check out the footage of what I was fortunate enough to go and check out that David and Emily have. Here you go. Welcome aboard.
Good to see you, brother.
Pugsies.
We've got 4 batteries under the bed and we've got solar panels all on the roof.
Come on in.
Wow.
Oh my gosh. This is so cool.
David said he brought it for us. Like he
It's a
gave it to us. Yeah.
You're gonna love it.
I am.
We did a PPG fly-in and we did a chicken drop. It was a target drop.
Oh my gosh, the shower. I didn't see that. Oh, there's a body in there. Right.
Turn on lights
Ew.
and turn them up. And you can choose colors and you can play around and make any kind of colors with them too if you want. So we got 52% fresh. We got 54% of our gray. Our batteries are at 85%. We're receiving 500 watts of solar.
About to go up. That cloud just passed.
Exactly. So it's all.
You look at that. It is going up.
There we go.
It's the Vertigo.
This one's a Vertigo, and that one's a Zenith.
Holy crap.
And
Yeah,
then some wings and
Some.
and you're gonna like this though. Check this out. This is our garage.
It'll lift me.
Yeah, absolutely. You can ride too though. Touch that touch screen. That shows us everything about our solar system. We've got 2 split phase inverters.
Oh yeah.
Other stuff.
Holy smokes. Yeah.
Mechanical.
Yeah.
And then, wanted to bring a selection of tools.
Oh, yeah.
But check this out. Perfect fit. This thing locks everything in the sockets, but then it's like nothing moves.
Why get an RV when you can have a really freaking cool bus? What made you want to get one?
Our friends Janice and Matt. Janice was a student when I was working in Florida. Her and her husband Matt had a seamless gutter business, and they decided to build a school bus, use their metalworking skills, raise the roof on a school bus.
Yeah.
They took a full-size bus, raised the roof, built it out, and used it to travel.
Structurally, is that like the only thing you really need to do so that you're not bunking your head when you go on these awesome camping trips?
You don't have to do a roof raise. Judson didn't do a roof raise
Well,
on
how
his.
tall is Judson?
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. So we have the same bus as Judson, but at 6'3", I want to be able to change a shirt and not hit my elbows on the ceiling.
Yeah.
And so we did an 18-inch roof raise. I'm sorry. Matt did an 18-inch roof raise.
Yeah.
So we found the bus we wanted just before we saw you 2 years ago.
Yeah.
In Phoenix. And we hired Matt to fly out to Phoenix from Pennsylvania.
Wow.
Drive it back to Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
And for how many months?
They had it for 6 months. They did the roof raise. They deleted all the windows, put in new RV windows for us.
Right.
Did the roof raise, and also the solar installation happened there.
Holy cow.
We were lucky enough to have another student couple that when they came up and visited with us in Connecticut, and they said, David, what are you doing for power?
Yeah.
What do you, and they're amazing friends, Karen and Steve Up. We met through a place I taught in Florida as well. And they quit their normal lives and bought a massive RV, and they've traveled the country for
6 years.
6 years now.
Wow. So they
Paramotor
served
pilots
as the inspiration to doing this.
change your
Wow.
life, live the life you want to live.
How much was this bus? What can somebody get a school bus for?
$10,000. Bought us a beautiful mid-sized school bus.
Yeah.
And all in, we probably put $80,000 into it.
Well, it looks
But with
amazing.
the amazing work of friends really coming together. It is like the stone soup of projects where, Matt and Janice contributed all that work to the build out. Steve came in, designed the electrical system he wanted to have on his bajillion-dollar motor coach.
Sure.
And he was able to build it and install it for us.
Right.
And just amazing. We had another student lead who hooked us up with amazing dealer cost deals on a lot of the components.
Right.
And then our friend Jay helped us with all of the interior build out. Friends helped us with plumbing, with gas fitting.
And you're doing
Electrical.
all that smart technology installation stuff because you were able to turn on the lights. You've got this awesome light strips that runs the length of the bus. You can monitor your gray tank, your black tank, and other
I
things
struggle
like
with the tech, but Emily really, she figures it out.
You're
She
the
gets
tech
it.
genie.
She gets it dialed in. Yeah.
Wow. So is this the biggest trip you've taken in the bus so far?
We did this trip last year. So
With the bus. Yes, that's right. Okay.
we had a 3,000 mile shakedown trip. We finished the bus and hooked it up to the trailer the morning that we left for the Salton Sea last year.
Wow.
And the
Holy cow.
trailer we hauled was 15 feet longer than the one out here.
Jeez, man.
It was, yeah.
Is it a tricky thing to drive going down the road?
It's big. It's top heavy.
It's got a sway to it.
Yeah, it swaggers.
Right. Leandra and I own like a 30-foot Class A motorhome a few years ago. We bought it from my parents. My parents bought this brand new motorhome. They did a trip around the United States. And by the time they got back, they're like, we cannot be this close to each other for that long. So they told us that they were going to sell it, and they sold it to us.
Wow.
And then it's just challenging, I think, when you've got, little kids and you're starting things out. Maybe it's not the precise time to get into that. But Leandra and I do aspire to get back into owning a motorhome or a bus maybe,
Right.
and doing something like that. Before this, you guys were cruising around in this was it a Mercedes or something like that?
Yeah, we had a Winnebago Mercedes Sprinter.
Yeah, yeah.
that I got a great deal on from
But
a
it
friend.
wasn't just a regular Sprinter. This thing was stretched out and it was like an RV.
Yeah, it was built intentionally as a Class B RV.
And I imagine that was way easier to drive than this thing.
Absolutely. But when I was gone 2 years ago and Emily was at the Salton Sea and our dog Frank wandered into camp, we outgrew that Winnebago.
Right.
So the bus became requisite for us and two dogs. And
Right.
so, yeah.
Overall, how happy are you with how it turned? I'm sure that you there's parts of you that love it. What do you miss from having the Sprinter?
Oh, this is an Emily question.
I miss the ease of the Sprinter just in
Yeah.
the way of driving it and being able to stealth camp, boondock in places.
Right.
I was in the Sprinter for a month by myself while David was at the bottom of the Grand Canyon doing the Colorado River trip. And
Oh my gosh.
it was very manageable for me. We had a 12-foot trailer at the time. And, the Sprinter van and the trailer was simple.
What's the value of that versus this bus?
New, a comparable Sprinter to that one would be $200,000.
Oh shoot.
New.
Wow. Yeah.
When that one was sold new in, was it 2009? It was $100,000.
Wow. Wow.
So the value is crazy. And our all in on that build is about $80,000. And it's probably, without sexy and amenities, it's probably comparable to a better build quality, but comparable to a $150,000
Well,
RV.
Class A, yeah.
one of the greatest things about that you showed me about your bus is this huge garage that you have in the back that even if you didn't have this massive trailer that you're towing behind it, that thing is pretty exceptional. You've got a big space where you can store multiple paramotors or put dirt bikes in there or something like that.
Right.
And it also, houses all of the brains of the operation for the bus.
Right.
Yeah, that's really sweet.
It's designed to scale really easily. Yeah, if we wanted to, we could throw a dirt bike on the front bumper. We could throw toys on the back hitch and travel without the trailer, which is really appealing.
Well, before we dive into Salton Sea and your flight school and other things, I want to learn a little bit more about you, starting with Emily. You're not only a life coach, but you're also a hypnotist.
Mm-hmm.
What? Like, that is super, super cool. How is that used in practice? Like, what does somebody come to you for and say, hey, I want to get hypnotized?
Any life change that you want to make.
Right.
Most of the time when people want to change their life, they try to do it through willpower. You know, it's
just like force,
just
like, I'm just going to do it.
Yeah. You're white knuckling your way through something, you know, whether it's a fitness goal or weight loss, quitting smoking, you know, changes in daily habits, doom scrolling social media, whatever it is.
Yeah.
If you do it with your conscious mind and you attempt to make those changes, you do have to think about it every day.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so with hypnosis, we tap into the unconscious mind, which is really the powerhouse of our existence. And when we make changes there, it's less of an effort every day to do it because we're just retraining the system.
I think the idea or the fear is that you're going to make them like, make chicken sounds and dance around or something like that. That's not what hypnosis is like.
No, it's not. And I get that all the time. That's the biggest fear is you're going to make me do something that I don't want to do, but it's not mind control. I can't jump into your mind and force you to do anything.
Right.
So if there's anything that I made a suggestion for that goes against your values, then you simply reject that suggestion. You'd open your eyes and say, well, that doesn't make sense for me.
Right.
And so you're in control the entire time. It's a state of focused relaxation. We go in and out of trance, which is hypnosis, all the time, right? You're watching a good movie, you're driving on the highway for many, many miles, and all of a sudden you're at your destination.
Yeah.
Right. So your unconscious mind is really running the show anyway. And so it's really natural for us to tap in and out of those brain waves. And so we're just doing it intentionally in the sessions that I do. And like you talked about addiction, we can also call it habituated patterns.
Right.
Anything that you do on a regular basis becomes part of your neurological experience, becomes comfortable inside of your mind. So you do the same thing every day. Let's say you hit snooze on your alarm 7 or 8 or 9 times. And that becomes the pattern. So when you have a stimulus, then you have a response, and that all happens outside of our conscious awareness. You're hitting snooze before you even realize that you're doing it. And so any pattern that you're living into day in and day out, and you want to change it, is something that can be changed through hypnosis.
So there's a book called Atomic Habits. Have you heard of it?
I have.
So what is the benefit rather than just simply reading that book, but being in that trance state? Like what's gained? Why does it unlock something? Like it opens a door? What is accessed by being in a state of hypnosis?
So when you read a book or listen to a podcast, you might have an aha moment, right? They call that top-down learning. So you're saying, oh, okay, from the conscious level, I understand this principle and I'm bringing it into my system.
Right.
With hypnosis, we're doing the bottom-up change. So we're saying, oh, let's tap into this vast resource and make changes at that unconscious level so that we can bring it up to the conscious awareness. So it's no longer that cognitive active thought process, and it's more about changes at the neurological level that determine how you move forward without thinking about it.
So when I fly a paramotor, if I'm flying at 500 feet, man, I'm in my space. If I'm at 100 feet, I feel great. All of a sudden, when I get to around 6,000, 10,000 feet, there's this irrational fear as if that's going to hurt me more than 100 or 1,000 feet where I feel comfortable. Could I come to you and then you help me realize this, or would it only then help me make me realize I should be fearing that too? Or I mean, what do you think?
Yeah, I love that that example because I have that too.
Yeah.
Right. You get to a certain altitude and you think, oh boy, you know,
now
it's like
I'm in danger.
The perception changes, right? Because our brains aren't actually wired to be in a lawn chair at 6,000 feet because we're just not wired to be that way, right? We're wired to have our feet on the ground.
Yesterday morning.
Oh, of course. Yeah. And so, yes. What we can do inside of the work that I do is essentially diminish the fear that you have by using tools that change the neurological experience around that.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of times people say, oh, exposure therapy. If I just go to 6,000 feet over and over and over again,
No.
it'll change. It'll change as long as fear isn't the driving factor. So, easy example, public speaking.
Mm-hmm.
I used to get up in front of an audience of people and cry because I just was uncomfortable with it. But there wasn't a fear factor. There was no, sort of fight or flight, if you will, of danger in that experience. I just wasn't good at it.
Sure.
So the more I did it, the more exposure I had, the better I got at it, the more comfortable I became. But when fear is the driving factor with an experience like being at 6,000 feet, let's say, fear actually tightens that neurological connection so that when you do it again, fear is at the forefront.
Right.
Because there is a danger to that,
it's
right?
just they're primed and ready.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And where, as a primal human being in that situation, our nervous system, our sympathetic nervous system says, hell no, like this is actually not a situation that we need or want to be in. There's an inherent danger there. So when we do that over and over and over again, expecting that it'll get easier, the fear actually becomes more tightly woven inside that system.
Yeah.
So what we do is knock down that fear, give you new, essentially putting up a barrier that says, oh, instead of fear, we're going to find peace, right? We're going to find a resource that's not down that old pathway.
Yeah.
Then once that's done, we can also say, well, what do I want to feel instead? So at 6,000 feet, I want to feel confident in my gear. I want to feel confident in my skills. I want to feel a level of safety knowing that I've got 6,000 feet if something does happen.
Sure, exactly.
And I have the resources to handle that situation.
Right.
Then we use hypnosis to reinforce all of that. So you're creating mental imagery at the unconscious level that says 6,000 feet is just fine.
And
it's okay.
The person's mind is able to be more imaginative when they're in that state of mind.
Absolutely. Yeah. So the way I like to describe it is imagine our mind, the entirety of our mind as an iceberg.
Yeah.
So our conscious mind is the top of the iceberg that we can see above the water, and our unconscious mind is everything underneath the water.
Okay.
Right. We know that icebergs are much larger below the surface, right? So with hypnosis, what we're doing is we're essentially taking away that water line that is the delineation between the conscious mind and the unconscious mind. We open that up inside of hypnosis, and then any suggestions that we make go right down into the unconscious mind. So after the hypnosis experience is over, that critical factor comes back in, but now there's a relationship between the conscious thought process and the unconscious belief.
Wow.
So now they're on the same page.
Okay.
Because it's oftentimes this tug of war of, I want to feel this way, but I'm trained and primed to feel the other way.
I've had students, and I'm sure that both of you have had students as well, where the fear can make something that otherwise would be relatively safe, like paramotoring can absolutely be, and make it potentially dangerous because the fear now interferes with what they should otherwise know how to do.
Yep.
How can somebody, whether it's through hypnosis or something else, kind of get over those those fears so that they can enjoy flight, so they can enjoy the thing that they set out to pursue?
Emily had a radical transformation this year, and I hope you can talk about that now.
It was about 2.5 years ago. So I started flying in May of 2022. And I trained out in Utah with Noah Rashetta at
cool.
Epic Paramotor, and we had a 10-day class. And the first 4 days of the class it rained sideways. I mean, we were in a trailer watching the rain, and then dust storms and dust devils, and it was the worst weather that we could have possibly had at the beginning portion of that training. And so I left the training with 6 flights. So as a brand new baby paramotor pilot, 6 flights is nothing. And I was then put in touch with David, which is how I ended up meeting him. He was training in New England. I was living in Maine at the time. And I started shadowing his trainings. And on what would have been my 20th flight, I was just starting to feel some independence. I was new to adventure sports and adrenaline-based activities. This wasn't really, while I had a flying background, I didn't have, the dirt bike or even mountain biking
So,
experience.
so if I can
adrenaline.
interrupt really quick, why did you want to get into flying?
So how do you know someone's a pilot, right? They tell you. So I was a private pilot. So I studied aviation. So my uncle took me flying when I was a
Really?
kid.
You studied it.
I did. Yeah. So I was 9. I went up in my uncle's Piper Cub.
Yeah.
I just was obsessed with aviation. My parents were very hopeful that I'd grow out of it, and I never did. So
Gosh.
I went to Bridgewater State in Massachusetts, and I thought I wanted to be a commercial pilot. So I got my private pilot certificate, and I liked flying, but I didn't love it. So I switched over to the business side of the industry.
But you loved aviation, but you didn't actually like
Flying
it.
And this is, most people have this reaction. I thought flying was boring. I loved taking off and landing. I loved doing maneuvers, but I was flying a 152 and to trim it out and sit for a long cross country, I would
Understood.
like, oh, all right, I'm waiting for my timer to go off for my next checkpoint.
Right.
And when am I ever going to get there?
Right.
Now
It's a commute almost.
It was. And the idea of doing that all day, every day as a career just didn't excite me. I love traveling, and I loved the idea of being in new places, and the actual work of being a pilot wasn't something that I was super excited about.
I'll interject really quickly and say that I'm actually on the same page as you, because I never gave a rat's butt about cross-country paramotoring. I think it's super boring. Like I want to be interacting with the flying all the time, like all the time, unless I'm like, okay, the mountain is like 5 miles, we'll say that way. Then I'll, accept that it takes 10 minutes to get there or something like that. But otherwise, I don't like that. And I thought the same thing. If I was to get my private pilot's license, like you don't get an airplane you can't fly an airplane like a paramotor. You can't interact, or unless you're, likely to hurt yourself because you're, being low to the ground, which is something that we want to talk about later on in the podcast. It's even more dangerous, way more dangerous in an airplane like that. So you can't. It's really just a form of commuting in a faster way, way more expensive way, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So sorry. I just thought that was really interesting.
Most people, when I describe flying as boring, it's like their mind sort of melts of like, how could that possibly be? Because I think what you do is so cool and exciting.
Right.
So I got into the aviation industry, and I spent 10 years in the industry working on the business side of things. I was doing a lot of aviation insurance work and safety studies. I was a contractor for the government for a little while. I kind of bounced around the industry, and I had opportunities to fly over those 10 years. And then I had corporate burnout, just classic, sort of being squashed by the man feeling. And I decided to quit my job and go to massage school because I just needed to do something different.
That's a big change.
It was. And I knew I wanted to help people. I knew that I wanted to be interacting with people in a much more connected way than just customer service inside of the jobs that I was doing. Which sort of fast forward, the pandemic hit and I had to close my practice. It was illegal for me to do the job that I was doing. And
what a
fortunately,
nightmare.
I was trained as a coach and a hypnotist at the same time. And so I transitioned over into the digital space, but all of that to say it had been about 8 years since I had been up in the air and I just missed it. There's just something about being in the air that feels so natural.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to fly airplanes anymore. So I ended up in the paramotor world.
Well, I was going to say, you just specified that with massage, you wanted to have a deeper connection with people.
Yeah.
In aviation, you have a deeper connection with actually flying when you're doing a paramotoring than you are with general aviation inside of a cockpit, which kind of takes you out of the environment, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. I think that's interesting. Just before you guys came here to do the podcast, I had Oscar Haynes, a British acro pilot, who happens to be living temporarily in the States. We were talking about females in aviation and just the curiosity as to why there aren't nearly as many female participants in paramotoring or probably aviation in general. So I find that to be super cool. So you're now, since the podcast has gone to a video podcast, the second guest who's been a female in the world of paramotoring, because prior to you, it was Alexis Quintana and Leandra counts as well. She's flown paramotors, but she lives here. She's You know what I mean. Anyways, I let her live here.
She lives next to your studio.
Yeah. There's obviously differences between men and women. Why do you think that you happen to have that? Were you, if I may ask, a little bit of a tomboy growing up?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. I basically grew up my dad's daughter, right?
Yeah.
And my sister was my mom's daughter.
Okay.
Right. And so my dad has a wood shop in our garage, and I was always down working on projects with him and out in the garden with him. So I definitely was more of the tomboy kid, but I think it was mostly my uncle's influence. When we went flying, he is out in the Seattle area, and I remember flying over waterfalls, and I remember thinking like, how cool is this? Like, we can see, at 9 years old, right? It's like,
are you hypnotizing me right now? Because I'm visualizing this. I'm all excited.
For sure. But I just remember thinking like, we live life on the ground, and then there's this other life up in the air.
Wow.
And my sister also went flying, and she was like, this is cool. Right. But it just didn't grab her the same way that it did me.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure, if it's genetics or astrology or, whatever it is. We're all built in different ways. But there was just something about that experience that stuck with me. I still have the picture of me sitting in the cockpit of his plane after the flight. And it was one of those, sort of core memories or life moments where everything changed for me. And at 9, you have no perspective of that. I didn't know how that day would influence so much of my life later on.
The way you describe it is almost romantic.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I remember my first tandem flight with Noah. He says, we landed, and he said, well, what'd you think? And I said, it just felt like home.
Yeah.
Like, there's just that feeling of peace and comfort of being off the ground.
Maybe you know this better than I do, but there's something that said that men are more interested in things and women are more interested in people. Right? Have you heard something along those lines?
I haven't heard it put that way, but I like that.
Yeah, I think there's some truth to it.
Yeah.
But I think that maybe the relationship that the average female has who is in aviation, this is a generalization, but maybe there is more of that romantic connection with the environment and where it takes you, as opposed to men thinking of the physics and the conquer the air. Yes.
Well, I think some of it too is just the history of aviation.
Yeah.
Right? It's a man's world, right?
It's a man's world.
When I was in college, I had to take ground school as part of my curriculum, and then I'd go to the flight school and do my training at an airport. And we had a class of 22 in my ground school, and 2 of us were women.
Right.
And I then graduated college, and I went to go work on Nantucket as an operations specialist for the airport. And there were a dozen men, and it was myself and one other woman who worked on the field.
Exactly.
And so, it is a male dominated industry. And I remember growing up thinking, I love aviation. I'm going to be a flight attendant. And then it was like, well, wait a second. I actually have options that are outside of that. And so I thought I maybe wanted to be an aerospace engineer, and then started thinking, but all along the way, it was never like, I want to be a pilot because I can be a pilot. Like I didn't even really understand that was an option for me. And so stepping into that world, I had to be really comfortable and confident in who I was, because I was in a room full of men.
Sure.
And there's a lot of women, I think, that maybe part of my upbringing and my relationship with my dad influenced that, and feeling like I could play in that arena. But I think there's a lot of women that maybe don't even entertain it as an option, because for so long it was just a man's job to be a pilot.
Yeah. My assumption is that the industry will always stay that way. Just as much as construction and things like that will probably stay that way. But I think it's awesome when you have a confident woman enter a workforce like aviation. Like I don't think they have to change who they are at their core. Like they don't have to become more masculine or something like that. Same with any industry. I think as long as they uphold themselves, they respect themselves, they have boundaries and things like that. And as long as they work hard, because of course, just like any other male dominated industry, all of that testosterone will inherently make it competitive. because men are aggressive and want to, fight to get to the top. Yeah, I think of in aviation, something you're passionate about. Do you know who Gwen Shotwell is?
No.
Gwen Shotwell is the highest appointed official at SpaceX. She is a woman who is the president of the most successful space industry, like a space company, a privatized space company, but now like unquestionably the greatest space company ever to exist beyond NASA. Although admittedly, NASA has some incredible accomplishments. We could get controversial and say, did they really happen? But no. But she serves as an example to me, and you remind me of what I've read about her in the sense that she's still very much a feminine woman. All of the employees, because I've just had a podcast episode with a SpaceX employee, really cool. I hope people check it out. But everybody loves Gwen Shotwell. They think dealing with Elon, they understand Elon's drive to extremely competitive, but she brings a lot of balance to the organization. So I think it's awesome when women do want to, but the assumption, going back full circle, the assumption is that it'll still, because of our biological preferences, be male dominated. Yeah. What do you think?
The gear favors men too. And Emily's got maybe some experiences to share as being a woman in this sausage fest game.
Yeah. I love your contribution talking about sausage. I have to say, like, I'm thoroughly enjoying this. So if you want to go do something,
great. Yeah. I love it.
No, I can't wait to get into the flight school and stuff like this. This is super, super interesting. I'm glad that we're having this conversation. Are you ready to up your paramotoring game? Look no further than Fly Products USA, the leader in innovative and reliable paramotoring equipment. Fly Products crafts some of the most advanced and well-engineered paramotors and trikes on the market, designed for pilots of all experience levels. Whether you're after the lightweight power of the Eclipse, the rugged versatility of the Rider, or the stability of their world-renowned trike systems, Fly Products delivers performance and durability you can count on. Their design prioritizes safety, comfort, and ease of use, so you can focus on enjoying your time in the air. One of the best parts? Fly Products USA offers exceptional customer service. Having owned several Fly Products paramotors myself, I can tell you it's unlikely you'll ever need much after your purchase. These machines are built to last. But when you do need support, it's reassuring to know that you're backed by a company that genuinely cares about its customers. Their team is knowledgeable, responsive, and ready to help you with anything that you need. So why choose Fly Products? Because you're not just buying a paramotor, you're investing in proven performance, cutting-edge innovation, and outstanding support. Check out flyproductsusa.com today to explore their full lineup and discover why pilots around the world trust Fly Products to take them higher. That's flyproductsusa.com. Your journey starts here. You were talking about you meet David and you're able to continue your paramotoring thing. You were talking about starting and then 2 years.
I'm coming up on 3 years total of flying, but I was about to do my 20th takeoff.
Okay. Yeah.
And I think I've always, in this world, in this arena, I described myself as a slow learner.
Yeah.
I think David has a different way of describing it, but I'm meticulous and I want to know that I'm in control of my glider. I want to know that that I have comfort with throttle control. And so I just was on a slower progression than most folks. At 20 flights, there's a lot of people who are fully independent. They're on their own. They're feeling really good about things. And that just wasn't my journey. But on my 20th attempt, I had a clean inflation. I had a good lean back. I was 2 feet off the ground and my foot swung back and hit the propeller.
Oh my gosh.
So I had a foot strike and both propellers broke. It cut my boot 4 times, knocked the airbox off, and David called for me to kill the motor. I flung my legs out in front of me and I landed on my butt. And so when it all happened, like in the moment.
This was with a Parajet Maverick, right?
No, I was on an Eclipse. I was
Okay.
on a Fly Products Eclipse.
Oh,
And
okay.
we've since looked at the geometry, and I now fly a Maverick, and I cannot reach my foot that far back, even if I wanted to, but
Yeah.
certainly have done a lot to work on posture and foot position.
Well,
and we can, do.
I was going to say, I've actually had a foot strike as well. Probably
Oh.
not as bad as yours.
I didn't know that.
I just got rid of the boots that had the slice right through the heel.
Yep.
And I was flying a Parajet Maverick with the Atom 80, and
Yep.
my foot went back. So that's
Yeah.
and when I contacted them, they were familiar with this sort of incident happening, and I think a lot of it does come down to posturing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think for me, it's twofold. It was posture, and where my legs were, the angle of my legs and the style of running, right? I think I was still very much running.
Long
And so
strides?
long strides, and my foot swung back almost as if like I was on a swing set.
Yes.
And the profile of the Eclipse is much slimmer. It's closer to the body,
Mhm.
and the length of my femur and the bend of my knee and the length of, my shin going back, it was the perfect storm.
Okay.
And so I landed, and in my head, I thought, well, something just bit me. That
geez.
was the sort of thought, right?
Huh.
Because you don't expect it to happen. You don't know what really happened.
Yeah, I can relate. I was
Right.
like,
And
what
so
the
I'm
hell?
on the ground, and I hear one of my fellow students say, should I make the call? And I knew at that point, I was like, oh, this is a big deal. Something has happened. And yet in my mind, I was like, I know I'm okay.
Yeah.
And so everybody came running over, helped me unhook from all the gear. And I was sitting on the ground with my legs outstretched. And I said, before anybody does anything, like, I just need a minute. And I was fully there and present, at least from my perspective. I don't know how much you remember, or maybe if it's different, but I just remember thinking, let me take my shoe off and see.
Yeah.
And I think everybody was fearful that if I had been cut, that there would be an immense amount of blood, but I took my boot off and my sock was still intact. And so I then peeled my sock back, and I had very heavy bruising in my heel, instantaneously, but it didn't break the skin at all. And so I said, I'm okay. Like, I'm okay. And had somebody help me off the field. I sat down with an ice pack and some ibuprofen. I watched the rest of the training window, and it didn't hit me until we were doing a video debrief afterwards.
Mhm.
And we watched it because at that point, I still didn't know what happened. I didn't know if I caused it. I didn't know if the airbox had fallen off.
Yeah.
That caused it. I didn't understand what had happened.
Mhm.
And I didn't even know that was possible for a foot strike to happen. And so we watched the debrief, we watched the video, and even watching it, it was like, okay, now I sort of understand what's happened. But it really hit me when what I noticed David doing was he was watching himself in the video, and he was standing right next to me as I was passing by. And as the prop got blown up and the airbox came off, all of it went flying in his direction. So he's, ducking and covering. And in David's, attempt for some humor, he said, I can just imagine another world where everybody's tending to Emily because she's got this injury, but nobody realizes that I have a piece of prop sticking out of my neck.
Jesus, man.
And
My story brain is real.
I lost it. I just lost it because
Yeah.
it was this reality of I had my injury and my experience with it. And this also could have radically changed somebody else's life.
Yeah.
And I'm a emotive person. Crying is a comfortable form of emotional expression for me. And I just started sobbing. I walked out of the pilot's lounge and just went and cried it out. But I think the reason that we started talking about this experience to begin with was that really changed my trajectory inside of my training experience, because the fear and the anxiety that I experienced was immense because I'd never had something like that happen before. David and I joke, I broke my arm rollerblading when I was between 7th and 8th grade, and I never rollerbladed again, right?
Yeah,
I fell down a hill and that was enough. It was like, okay, I'm done. And so I spent the first couple of days after the accident just really evaluating, how do I feel about this sport and what do I want? And is it worth the work that I know that I'm going to need to put in on the mental side of things to keep going with the physical and practical progression of becoming proficient at the sport? And it was 10 days after the accident that David took me for a tandem flight, and I cried the whole flight. And most of it was just relief. It was like, oh, I do love this. I do want to be in this experience. I want to get through this. I want to move past the trauma of it.
Right.
And so then it was, I think, another week after that I had my first solo flight again. And, my experience with it was I would put the motor on and walk it out to where I thought I would be launching from. I'd put it down. I'd cry. I'd walk back to, the gear. I'd grab my glider. I'd lay out my glider. I'd cry. I'd put my motor on. I'd warm it up. I'd take it off. I'd cry. And it was just moving through this intense fear. And, like we mentioned earlier about the exposure therapy, it was like in the early flights after the accident, like every component of it was its own exposure therapy.
Yeah.
And because I was a coach and a hypnotist, I immediately went to peers and colleagues in the industry and started working through it. And I would say that about 80% of the trauma was managed. And I still had anxiety every single time that I flew. So for 2 years, I would have to talk myself into it. If the conditions were perfect, I was okay. But if it was light and variable, if it was nil wind, if it was a new field, if it meant leaving the training field, anything that was outside
a variation of what you,
the comfort zone was a battle for me to get to.
That makes a lot of sense.
I would make every excuse in the book. I would focus on students. I would focus on the dogs. I would say, well, this condition isn't right, or I didn't sleep well last night. And I had every excuse in the book. And I took a new training this past fall for my coaching skills. And I learned that all of those excuses and the procrastination and the distraction were all symptoms of anxiety.
Interesting.
But I had never labeled it anxiety because I don't think that I've ever been an anxious person. And so I didn't know that what I was facing every single time I thought about flying was actually anxiety. And so I learned a new technique and it wiped out the remaining bits of anxiety that I had. And in the 5 days after that training and clearing out what I had, the residual stuff I had, I flew more in those 5 days than I had in the previous 5 months. Because those previous 5 months, I had a very excuse in the book of why I couldn't fly or didn't want to fly or, whatever that experience was. And so it was such a liberating experience to be in a place of joy with the sport again.
Yeah.
And I remember we were at Jersey Shore for an informal gathering fly-in. And I remember thinking, and I probably said it out loud, when does this get to be fun?
Yeah. That's a common thing.
Everybody's out here having the time of their life. And, all of, it's exciting and it's fun. And it's this, liberating experience. But because I was so crippled with anxiety and the fear that I had because of my personal experience with my training, it was like, I didn't ever have fun. But there was something in my mind that like every time I pushed myself over the hurdle to get on the field and actually fly, it was like, it's worthwhile. I know that this is something that I love, and I know that this is something that I'll get to love for a long time, so long as I keep pushing through it. And so for the last 2 years, it was a job for me. It was work to go out and to do the work and run the laps. And, we went to the Salton Sea 2 years ago for the first time. I think I had 90 flights there, including touch and goes. But I was there to work. I was there to get the reps, the laps. Like I was there to move through that experience. And so I think, sort of we were tying this back to how can the tools that I have in this other part of my world help? It finally was that experience for me of this does get to be fun. When we go into the mind and unravel that knot of anxiety or fear, whatever you want to call it, then there's opportunity for new stuff to come in. And I hadn't yet unraveled all of it to get to the place where joy could be brought into it and excitement and fun and camaraderie. And so us being out at the sea this year was a totally different experience because I walked out onto the field and I flew. It wasn't this talking myself into it and looking at the windsock and deciding whether or not I could do it. It was just, I get to go and fly with my friends and the community that we've worked really hard to build with our school. And so,
is it the body's like natural defense mechanism to avoid doing something that it's signaling, hey, this is dangerous. This is danger.
Uncomfortable, just discomfort. Yeah.
Right. Because that's considered danger or a threat. Right. Our primary mission, our unconscious mind's primary mission is to keep us alive.
Yeah.
And is to keep us safe. So even when it's a perception of fear or danger, our system kicks in a way that provides protection for us.
Right.
And so it might be that, oh, I don't want to do that, or I can come up with any reason in the world not to do that thing. But that truly is a protection mechanism.
Well, how much of it is justified? Like how much of it is legitimate, a beneficial fear? Because I suppose the question is how safe is paramotoring really? Like, are you potentially tuning out something that is a legitimate concern, or can you make those good choices? Is paramotoring actually safe if you make it safe?
So what we say to students is it's as safe as you make it.
Right.
And I think that a certain level of fear kees us conscientious and vigilant about what we're doing. It keeps us from tipping over into complacency.
So another way I've heard it said is rather than simply fearing it, you respect it.
Absolutely. And I think, it's the difference between fear that keeps you aware and fear that keeps you from doing things. Right. So for me, the fear that I had experienced prior to applying the new tools that I had learned to it kept me from enjoying it. It kept me from living into that experience. Right. And it was, I think, definitely a detriment to my overall just journey within the sport. And so I would say that level of fear wasn't healthy because it also sort of put me in this like tunnel vision experience of I'm walking out to the field. I have my gear. I've done my pre-flight. I have my glider. Where's the wind? And so it was like a lockdown experience. Yeah. But it also kept me from having that sort of wider perspective of what I was even doing. Right. It was like, I'm just here going through the motion. And in that tunnel vision, it's impossible to also be aware of everything else. So what am I missing? Because the fear has me in my blinders.
It's much better to be in a position in flying where you're just in tune with things because it keeps like your vision broad.
Yeah.
Like I like the example might be if all of a sudden I'm in an airplane and the pilot passes out or something like that, and now I'm in control of the aircraft, I'm going to be way too technical on every little detail as opposed to going off a feel like, hey, it's okay. I know what I'm doing. I'm still going to check for air traffic to, all around me and things like that. But I can totally see what you're saying, where when you're so dialed into this procedure that you're not aware of things outside of, the procedure. Because if you were to list everything, like every little detail, you wouldn't be able to create a procedure. There would be way too many things. Those are things that should come through comfort and awareness of checking your surroundings or checking your glider and things like that. But that makes sense. I suppose another example with the general aviation is that instrument cluster that they have in the cockpit constantly scanning. But then you could get like locked onto one because you're too worried about getting every little step right rather than just freely glancing at them and kind of like, having this cycle of just checking it because you're comfortable.
Yep.
Based off of how you describe your passion for just being in the environment and what it affords you, it makes me wonder, is there a part of you that thinks that if in the future there was some sort of automated aircraft, like these drones that DJI makes. They're now starting to make ones that are totally automated. You can just basically push a joystick. You don't have to think about a rudder or your bank angle or things like that. Would you want to have an aircraft that just takes you there rather than having the complexity?
That's interesting. I don't know. My sort of initial thought was I enjoy the technical aspects of it. I enjoy the skill development. I can look back when I'm not being super hard on myself because I am.
She has a very particular set of skills.
Okay.
And I think to acknowledge and honor where I was in the beginning and where I am now in my experiences, it's a pretty cool thing to be able to look back and
for sure.
and see the progression.
Yeah.
And so to hand all of that over to an automated system feels a little bit like part of the reason why I didn't want to go down the commercial pilot route was you're flying a computer. You're not flying an airplane anymore.
Right.
And so would it take away some of that connection to it? I'm not sure. But the idea of just going for a cruise, that's also pretty nice.
I think yesterday morning was the perfect example of that.
Yeah.
Where, want to speak about that?
So we were in Arizona near the copper mine in Acton.
The big old hole in the ground.
Yeah, it's giant. And it's one of those things you can't actually understand how giant it is until you're flying over it and around it. But we've had a really busy experience being on the road, and there's been a lot of life that has happened. And we woke up in the morning with the desire to fly and the physicality that wasn't in alignment with that. You know, you've got tired bones and sore feet and mental space that's not in alignment with making the best decisions for foot launch. And we were able to do a tandem flight together. And so we've got wheels and had the opportunity to fly together and to have it be a joint experience as opposed to an individual responsibility for me. And so it was a great experience to be up in the air and to not feel like I was 100% responsible for every decision that I made. And, you know, to be in that space where I'm feeling good about where I'm at as a pilot. And so it was just a nice, joyful experience and a more relaxed experience to be in the tandem rig instead.
Truly a shared experience, because while I had hands-on controls the whole time, Emily was on top of navigation and in-flight snacks. And
the photo experience and the video experience.
You need to carry little peanut packs.
I know,
That would be great.
And put them on tethers.
Before we continue, I just want to take a moment to thank all of you for being part of the Paramotor Podcast. It means so much to me to have this amazing community of paramotor enthusiasts tuning in. Creating the podcast takes a lot of time, energy, and yes, money. And I've poured everything that I've got into it because I'm passionate about bringing you quality content. But to keep this show going and growing, I need your support. So if you love the podcast, I'd really appreciate if you'd consider supporting us on Patreon. Even if it's just $3 a month, it helps keep the wheels turning. If you're not in a position to contribute financially, no worries at all. You can still sign up for free. You'll get access to exclusive behind the scenes content and be able to submit questions for upcoming guests and more. Sign up by clicking the link in the description, or you can click the icon in this top right corner now. And if you could take just one more second to like, subscribe, and turn on the notifications, it would mean a lot to me. Also, leave a comment letting us know where you're flying and how long you've been in the air. It helps the podcast grow and keeps the community strong. Thank you for supporting the show, and now let's get back to it. David, Emily, and I had an in-depth conversation about the tragic passing of Moriah Gottschalk. Mo was an incredible instructor, a world-class pilot, and above all, a friend. He had an incredible way of connecting with people and had a profound impact on all who met him. We've made the decision to remove a portion of the conversation here to respect Mo's memory, as well as to be sensitive to everyone who is deeply affected by his passing. While we have removed certain details of our conversation, we did go into discussion about what can be learned from tragedies like these. Thank you for your understanding and grace as the Salton Sea family, Team Fly Halo, Mo's friends and family, and David and Emily move through this period of deep mourning. What could be done to maybe prevent the number one cause of death in paramotoring? from happening more?
I think not normalizing low acro. I mean, we normalize low acro we've got a Facebook for beginners group that has broadcast videos of guys doing barrel rolls below 100 feet.
Like almost as a look at what you can get to.
Buy this gear and you can do this.
That's not good.
It's not a good look, and it's not good for the industry. It's not good for the sport. It's not good for people who want to live their lives and go home to their families.
You know, one of the things that I do appreciate, and I actually, it took me a minute to learn this. Alexis Quintana, part of the Arrhythmia Air Team, I was like, what do you mean you guys don't do acro and throw down during this air show? Like, that's not what it's about. You know, it's about getting up there, and we don't want to scare people into thinking this is how you fly a paramotor. It's about getting up there and, just like you say, Emily, like getting up there and experiencing it, kind of in appreciating the ability for us to access this environment that is not innate in human nature. Like, I mean, flying is not our domain. I think that when we mentioned earlier, you don't want to fear it, you want to respect it. It doesn't seem as though aggressive low acro is respecting it, because it only takes one thing to go wrong, one miscalculation. And when I do watch Ryan's videos, I am thoroughly impressed. And I do think, damn, that's badass. But I can't help but think, like, even when I watch Tucker's videos or even some of my own videos, I'm like, damn, only one thing had to go wrong there. And actually, there is this one instance where I got my Dudek Warp, a competitive glider, slalom glider, where I'm like fresh on it. I'm making a video. I'm flying like crazy. And there was this one time where I dove down towards the ground and I didn't hit it, but I thought, damn, I got lower than I intended to. And it's that moment where, oops, it was a tiny miscalculation when your brain only has seconds, less than a second, sometimes a fraction of a second, to calculate the correct input to avoid
You throw
death.
in any gear failure. I mean, if Mo was 8 feet higher, he might have rounded the curve.
Sure.
If he was 1,000 feet to the east over the water, he probably would have skipped.
Exactly. One thing.
One thing.
One thing.
Had he not said just one more and didn't have enough energy to finish it, it was that close. But Dan West, I spoke with him yesterday, runs West Paramotor, was Colorado Paramotor before. Dan and I were talking, and he raised the idea that you only get one opportunity to fall out of the sky. I might have two. You got really lucky. Lots of questioning. I mean, just 4 days before Mo went down,
right,
I was the only pilot in flight on the field. It was a little blowy. It wasn't dynamic, but it was consistent wind. And I launched a wing. You might only guess what wing it was. It wasn't the wing, but I flew that wing. And
say its name.
I flew a wing that I've been feeling out with trepidation.
Yeah.
And the good folks at Scott and Steve sent me a wing, and I took it in as a demo, and I've made it my wing, and I'm working to figure it out.
For the record, I don't think that there's anything wrong with a
There's
BGD
nothing
Luna
wrong
3.
with the BGD Luna 3 and the size 23. Only pilot in flight. And I took about a 35%. I'm sorry.
He was on a downwind, and I would say it was probably about a 40% collapse at about 50 feet, maybe. And then it reinflated, and he took another 30% collapse immediately thereafter.
Gosh.
2 in a row.
Why?
I have to believe it was weather. There was virga in the distance. There was, big clouds,
Were there
overhead.
signs on the ground of
the ground? It was mellow on the ground.
I just completed a dozen touch and goes real close to the beach.
Yeah.
Wind was coming over the RV park at Salton Sea.
Was it turbulent?
No, it was pretty consistent, maybe 8 mile an hour wind, easy inflation, easy flight. I'd just done a dozen touch and goes 400 feet downwind from there.
Mm-hmm.
My guess is there was some sort of a rogue gust that just sort of kissed the left side of the wing on a downwind.
Wow.
But she was on the ground under me, I was just up to burn fuel off from a motor, and to see I'm 50 feet, 40% collapse on a downwind.
Ooh.
Yeah, and real easy to see. I mean, yeah, it could have been me.
Have you had a collapse like that prior to it?
Not like that.
I've only had, well, 2 collapses, but prior to the nasty one I had, I was flying a ozone spider along the mountain, and it slapped one side of the wing down, probably a 40% collapse. And I mean, thank God for training and learning kind of what to do, combined with I believe that I have a little bit of a sense of what to do. Just not on April 22nd.
Lee side?
Yeah, lee side of the mountain. Yep, sure.
Yeah.
And then so that rotor
Right.
coming off of the mechanical turbulence, right?
Yep.
Coming off of the mountain creates these swirls of air that, circular, kind of like it's whirling around. And sure enough, that's what I believe totally happened.
Yeah.
And it stayed collapsed for approximately maybe 4 seconds, we'll say.
Wow.
And I lost some altitude, but because I was flying at probably 2,000 feet, it was a non-issue.
With the reserve?
I think, yes. I think at that point I was still flying with a reserve.
Okay.
And if I do fly again, which I very much plan to do, I will be flying with a reserve, and every single little detail will be put into ensuring that I stay safe. And I totally believe that I can. I totally believe that paramotoring can be done. I don't think that it's necessarily the most enjoyable way for most people to fly, but after all, I have a family to think about. I have I need to be deeply appreciative of my family's willingness to allow me to fly again. And the exchange is that I assure them that the decision-making process will be different this go around. On that note, I was speaking with my aunt, the wife of my uncle, who's now the district attorney for Los Angeles. A lot in the news about that with the Menendez brother case going on.
Oh, wow.
It was a Netflix series. She was telling, I opened up to her, told her, hey, I plan on flying again. And she, an individual who's never flown a paramotor or been into extreme sports, aside from maybe some skiing in some exotic places, wanted to remind me that it's in those moments, just like I'm sure it was for Mo, and I'm sure it was for my friend who passed away, and most people who passed away, or anybody who passes away from low acro, where you get into this state of mind where you just slip up. Like you just don't become abundantly aware of the fact that what we're doing is inherently dangerous. And I don't want to confuse people into making them think that I'm saying that paramotoring is dangerous, because just like you said with your school, paramotoring is as safe as you make it, and you can make it, I believe, very safe. Like if I was to go to the beach and I'm waiting for the perfect conditions and I'm flying a beginner glider and I'm flying with a reserve if I go up high, or if I'm down low, I'm limiting it to like 5 feet on a super slow glider. Then what's the worst case scenario? Realistically, sure, some crazy accident can happen. But then again, this asteroid that's coming in, potentially identified as asteroid 2024 YR4 or something like that, that thing could drop on my head. All jokes aside, some sort of crazy thing could happen. But I believe that I can reduce the risk so that the probability of something happening is about the same as an asteroid falling on my head that slipped through the radar of NASA. Yeah.
I was lucky enough to get to meet Mo's friend, James.
Mm-hmm.
Mo and James met a 3 years ago, and James is an amazing, beautiful, brilliant person, insanely talented in any form of aviation or anything that he's studied. Really special brain, really special heart. James helped Mo find a new direction that worked really well for him. Mm. And Mo helped Judson find a similar direction and really made good life changes, helped support really good life changes in these guys. And,
nice.
And in debriefing with James, James has been running tow operations for forever. Mm-hmm. He's done all sorts of flight activity with Mo. I've always maintained the idea that what we do, what we teach, you and I teach basic driver's ed of aviation. Mm-hmm. We don't teach advanced maneuvers. We don't teach SIV.
Basics on staying safe and getting into the air.
That's safely. It. How to get into the air, how to cruise, safely cruise.
Yeah, sure.
That's what we teach. And I've always held to that idea that what we teach is safer than driving to the field. Yeah. Safer than the commute. I have this I make up this idea that, we're never going to get hit by a soccer mom in a Suburban who's on their cell phone while we're in the air. So
yeah, exactly. It's all of the external factors that make driving dangerous. And one of the beautiful things about aviation is that you're actually getting away from all of that nonsense.
So
then the decision comes down to yours, your choices.
Right. You choose the right weather, the right conditions, the right gear, and to fly around the right people and keep your head on a swivel.
For sure.
And you should have a good idea. But James, processing with him after, raised the idea that no, we're in the air. If we have something go really wrong at 30 feet, you fall off we're in Texas, we got low roofs here, but you fall off your 15-foot roof wrong.
Game over.
There's a lot that weighs heavy about that on me as an instructor, because I could give the best instruction and it might not be followed.
Right.
And I don't know that I want to deal with the weight of that.
Yeah.
It's a lot of weight. And I know right now I'm in a really a place, but it's just a lot to consider.
Yeah.
And James is right. He's spot on. We've had students who essentially lock out and become non-responsive in early instruction.
And that's what we're talking about, like with the fear thing. Yeah.
Right. We were lucky enough to learn some tools from Eric Dufour. We did some training with Eric down in Florida.
Wicked talented.
Yeah. Granddaddy of the sport. Cool. And
I recorded a podcast episode. He was one of the first people I've recorded a podcast episode with, by the way.
I need to go back to the archive.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. I thought I started from the start. Maybe I heard it. What Eric really pushed during our workshop with him, during our time with him, this winter, we went down to do some training with Eric Dufour in Florida, in Jasper, Florida. He's got an amazing operation. Anyone who wants to advance at all in their progression.
Yeah.
Eric's been training for 30 years.
Right.
And the training I learned in Florida when I went to train at Aviator was a derivative. Eric taught them.
Oh, okay.
They changed it. They modified it. They polished it. And to go back to the source, to take out the telephone game was remarkable.
Yeah.
But speaking to specifically, I found my point again, was that the way I learned to teach was simulators, is one lap. If somebody has trouble when we're talking through the simulator, we'll step back and we'll do that little part again. But with Eric and his protege, Jonathan, Jonathan Carr?
Yes.
Yeah, man. Jonathan was there with us for this training as well. And you simulate 5, 6, 7 times your launch, your landing, before you have a student out there running with a motor. You simulate it until it's routine.
How are you simulating it?
Hanging on a sim frame.
Okay.
Motors hanging. Yeah. Simulate. Just run it until everything is spot on dialed.
Yeah.
Then the student doesn't have to have a motor on while they're thinking about running and coordinating.
Right.
It's just get this timing in, beat in the repetition, and then you have far less risk of that student going into overwhelm and not receiving input, not hearing you. You're repeating the script repeatedly, same language in simulation. We had a student with some hearing loss who, as soon as he left the ground, his brain went into lockout.
Yeah.
He was doing only what he thought he needed to survive. He heard nothing that came through comms.
I've experienced that with the student.
Yeah. So for us to learn, wow, we could just keep doing it. And that's one way to help mitigate that.
When I think of Eric Dufour, I think of a classic paramotor pilot who, it would be good if the communities went back to doing some of the challenges, like challenging yourself to do things that aren't really nearly as dangerous as what people are challenging themselves with today, with things that come with a lot of risk, like that low acro. Like Eric Dufour with what was it? His white boots. That's what people knew Eric Dufour with. Yeah. He could fly do a lap around the field, come in and land inside his boots, right?
Better than that.
Yeah.
Eric had us working on launch, make your crosswind, make your downwind, get to your downwind to base turn, kill your motor.
Right.
Kill your motor at downwind to base, and then kick that cone over where you launched.
That is something that individuals can do that still gives a huge sense of like fun without going into super danger zone sort of things.
Right.
Like for me, it's like the classic competitions, like spot landing and things like that, which then it's like, okay, you pull the brakes too deep when you're 2 feet above the ground. What's the worst case scenario? I mean, these are things that like aren't get the fastest glider, get the, do that maneuver as low as you can to the ground.
It's polish.
The precision.
It's precision. And
it's fun. It's super exciting.
Well, like we talked about with flying, it's like you're doing a long cross country, whether you're on a paramotor or in an airplane, and you sit and you take in the sights, and that's nice for the first couple minutes, but then it's boring. And so I think there are folks out there who think that the next step in the progression to keep it exciting is to start doing acro. And as you might gain some comfort, do acro lower so that the adrenaline level stays high. But like you just said, there's so much fun and technicality that can be leveraged when you're doing things like spot landing or
the list goes on.
Yeah, even just intentionally doing crosswind inflations, right? There's all sorts of different ways to build the skill, which makes you a safer pilot in the long run, but keeps things fun and exciting because it's dynamic again.
Yeah. I was going to say, like, as an alternative, sometimes you can combine paramotoring with something else. Something that I'd love to do that doesn't push into dangerous flying might be, taking a little tent with me with some of the freeze-dried meals that I've had and just challenging myself as if I was a paramotor bush pilot and going maybe not too far or something like that, but still flying very conservatively and challenging myself to see what I can take that's a light pack and try to challenge yourself with things that don't raise the risk level of it.
We had 1 0 to hero student come out from New England to the Salton Sea to do training from nowhere. We started him from scratch, and we had 3 or 4 others who were super low flight remedials. So they had trained with us a year or 2 years ago or earlier this fall, who had 1 flight, 3 flights, or 6 flights.
Right.
So we brought these guys in, and our 3 remedials, we were able, by the end of their time training with us, to get them to come in. At Salton Sea, there's an RV park that is directly next to the LZ.
Oh, cool.
Can't fly over the RV park. So if the wind is coming towards the RV park, you've got a narrow field that's maybe 150 feet by 400 feet. So that 150 feet becomes your final to landing. So we're working, this is totally different from how I've trained, how you train.
Right.
When we have someone coming in to land, we're generally setting them up a half a mile out.
Yeah.
And we're setting them up for a nice straight in half mile.
Yeah.
Let everything settle. We had students who, with 8, 10, up to 30 flights, were making approaches, making their down to base turn at 80 feet. Typically, we're having people out of their seat at 80 feet, ready to land, everything straight and settled. We had students that we were able to get stuff dialed in and so comfortable that at Salton Sea, under 30 flights, they were making base to final turns below 50 feet and sticking in 150 foot transition from final at 50 to landing on the wind in 150 feet. And talk about precision work. These are low hour students, like not an hour students. And that sort of precision work, to have an opportunity at someplace like the Salton Sea. This is why I tell people repeatedly that Team Fly Halo makes the best pilots. They do, because the precision work that Boyd and his team get to do, it's amazing. The opportunity you have with the wind you have there, it's amazing. But to be able to work on precision stuff like that with low hour pilots, have consistent weather, it's a big piece of what had us excited to bring students out to the sea and really like work on hard maneuvers in safe, easy conditions.
Yeah.
You know, I came into this from whitewater where, you know, I got to be a pretty good class 5 whitewater canoeist. I'd run 25-foot waterfalls in a canoe.
Oh, wow.
But to go back to being a class 2 boater, class 3 boater, when my son was born, he was 3 years old when I took him on his first class 4 rapid. So 3 years old. And so that was a lot of what our talk on Monday morning with Mo was about. It's like, wow, this is an opportunity that forces us to go back to working on the detail work, working on precision versus, yeah, I can do this and get away with it. Now I've got somebody else's life in my hands. And this is really got to be precise, really got to dial it in. And sorry, one more thing. The idea that tandems are like just something willy-nilly to go out there and do, like, no, it's the ultimate. Somebody's trusting you with their life.
Right.
You should absolutely have your skills dialed in.
Right. Speaking of tandems, taking it back to You Can Fly PPG, your flight school, you're based out of Simsbury, Connecticut. That's where you do the training, right? Which is 2 hours from your hometown of Holliston, Massachusetts. And you grew up in Webster, Massachusetts. That's really exciting that you brought your students from the New England area all the way to Salton Sea to get to do this awesome trip. That's really creative. But as far as you, like the learning never stops. And you just recently became an instructor administrator with the USPPA. Is that right?
We did. Yeah, I did. Yes.
Yeah.
It's we, because I couldn't have done it if Emily didn't keep me focused and really make it all happen. But
that's a huge thing. That's essentially as high as you can go in the USPPA. You can create new instructors.
We can spawn instructors now.
Yes.
It became a necessity for us as a school.
Yeah.
Because what's the other solution? I mean, I need to send someone after they intern with me to someplace where there is an instructor administrator, and the system's a challenge like that.
Sure.
There wasn't another instructor administrator north of South Carolina or east of Indiana. So the whole northeast of the country, there wasn't an opportunity for someone to make an instructor legit. So that was a big piece of why I reached out to Eric Dufour. I mean, I trained with Travis and with Eric and with Kyle and with Ron Turan. They were the 4 instructors that were at Aviator when I was there. And the idea of going to Travis would be great. I love him. Amazing guy. But Travis talked me up on my first flight. I wanted to learn more from someone that offered something else. And that was why Eric made sense. He's got an amazing facility in Jasper, Florida. He's still actively training every day, actively flying every day. A total goofball while maintaining incredible safety margins.
And he has a French accent.
He does. And honestly, that French accent, I think, is a good piece of what makes him such an amazing instructor, because Eric teaches almost non-verbally. He dances. He has a set of hand signals that, I mean, he'll throw his arms out. Come to me. Come to me. Bring the wing up.
Easy.
He starts with chest.
Oh, chest. Lead with your chest. Lead with your chest out.
Yeah.
It's just brilliant.
It's more effective probably than the verbal communication.
Trying to yell at somebody through a crappy radio system that's trying to overcome the motor. And it's amazing training. He offered a great opportunity for us to go down. We trained alongside Jonathan Carr. We both learned so much about what we don't know. What really inspired me there was the idea that Eric taught the Aviator system to the Aviator guys. That system has gone on and been taught a lot of places, and it's derivative and it's telephone game. And there's just so much.
You think that there's potentially a diminish in quality in instruction around the United States?
I don't want to say that.
Well, keeping it real.
But at the root,
there's great instructors.
Yeah, at the root, what Eric teaches is phenomenal and simple.
Right.
There's no polish. There's no need for polish. It just works.
I think one of the things that we talked about while we were down there is that most folks go through their initial training. They get their driver's ed, right? And then they're out on their own. And a lot of the stuff that they learn beyond that is self-taught. They might do an advanced course or a skills development class or something, but there's not this kind of like continuing ed, like collective community experience of where do you go for education after you're out of your initial training. And whether that's an individual pilot who's on their own pilot experience or it's an instructor, once you learn the techniques of how to teach or how to fly, it sort of stays within that container. And so to learn from different instructors and to have a collaborative experience brings more awareness. It brings more education. It brings more opportunity for people to be able to interact with that information in a way that's accessible and digestible, right? And so if you train in a certain environment and you return to that environment, then you're still training within that environment. And we say to our students, you're always welcome to come back, right? Your training is never done.
Yeah.
Right. And if you only come to us, you're going to get our perspective. But to go and train at a different school or with a different instructor means that you get different perspectives and you get different styles of learning and you get different bits of information because different instructors are passionate about different things within the sport. But how do we actually create that collaborative environment? Because so often you've got an instructor in New England and an instructor in Ohio and an instructor in South Carolina, and everybody's just doing what they need to do to keep their businesses thriving or alive or, whatever the situation is, right. that opportunity for that cross collaboration and learning from each other doesn't really exist. So the USPPA does a great job with setting standards and making sure that folks are maintaining a baseline of safety, and it doesn't really provide that opportunity for folks to come together, even like this in a conversational manner, talking about things that they're seeing or trends or deficiencies within the training systems.
It's for most, the next step after your basic driver's ed training is an SIV. And it doesn't have to be. An SIV.
Yeah, I was going to say, that seems like a big jump.
I mean, there's a lot that's great about it. I mean,
but there's a lot more that you can learn before, like you said, the continuing education. There's so much more, whether it is the instructors or just good mentors within the flying community.
Well, one of the things that we saw at the Sea was chatting with a guy who learned from his instructor, and it was your basic flight instruction. And he was on an A glider and he got bored of that A glider. And the instructor said, you're not ready to make the jump that you're looking to jump to a more advanced glider. The guy said to him, well, if you don't sell it to me, I'll buy it from somebody else. And so then the instructor is now put in a position where he doesn't have the skills and abilities to take that pilot through a progression to do more advanced work and to feel comfortable and proficient on an advanced glider. So now this guy, he thinks, well, I need a very specific glider in order to do the maneuvers. Because on my A wing, I'm not able to do good wing overs or big wing overs or barrel rolls or whatever it is. So I'm now going to jump 2 or 3 steps above in order to get a wing that I can yank and bank on to do the things that look cool. Well, now this guy is being set up for failure because his original training environment didn't provide the progression that he wants, but he doesn't care because he's going to do it anyway. And so it's those sort of gaps, I think, that are becoming more apparent as we talk to more people and hear more experiences where people, this is kind of a throwback to the earlier conversation about when you see low acro and you see people doing incredibly technical maneuvers, the gap between where they started from and where they are now isn't necessarily highlighted. And we talk about this a lot in our training is you see Tucker and you're seeing 12 years of experience.
Right.
You're not watching 12 years of progression.
Right.
You see the final product and you say, oh, he makes it look so easy. He takes a breath and the wing is up overhead. But there's so much that goes into that that's not seen.
Yeah.
It's not part of an accessible education opportunity for people. So they go out and they say, well, if he can yank and bank it, I can yank and bank it.
Well, I mean, on top of that, sometimes somebody will never arrive at that skill. Some people truly are just born with that ability to do it.
Yes.
There's plenty of students that I've had where they can get to the point where they can go out and cruise, as you say, but it's not in them to be able to fly like Tucker or Ryan Gloka or Anthony Vella. No. The push that people have within themselves to progress quickly is massively concerning. I feel like, I wonder what I would do in that situation where you have a student who's saying, I will go and get it from somebody else. I think I'd say, fine. Like, I don't think that I would care. I mean, I would care. I'd be pissed at the individual's stubbornness.
I think there's also a way to handle it too. If we have somebody who comes to us and says, I really want to learn how to do barrel rolls. Okay, well, here are the resources, right? There's Freestyle 101. There's, instructors who are out there who do the work. We've got an amazing instructor with us, John, who he kited for 300 hours before he ever put a motor on.
Oh, good for him.
He's self-taught. He came from an incredibly conservative approach and wanted to know everything about his glider before he added another layer of complexity to it. So his glider control and his progression into more technical maneuvers is something that
super methodical
is now model. Like, it's a model though, to say, okay, well, actually here's now all the things that you can do that are going to get you to that barrel roll. Right. And so if somebody says, I'm ready for a more advanced glider, we can say, oh, that's great. We're happy for you to progress.
Yeah.
Here are the steps that you need to do in order to know that you've got the skills and the safety margins and everything to make that approachable.
Mm-hmm.
And if we're not the people to do that with you, then here are the people who could be a good resource for you.
Certain self-taught individuals are incredible role models.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's like a very fine line between suggesting to anybody that they can go and teach themselves, because those people have it within themselves, like a high level of concern and fear and strategy and taking those steps like very slowly. I've met several people. Some of them have been very good friends, but it's almost like the bunny hill concept where they kite, like they're just kiting nonstop. They're reading through the materials. They're spending months like looking, and then they'll go, the first time they go 5 feet up that little slope, they're like, and they progressively make their way up but they'll do it repetitively. And they will continue that even after they are in the air and cruising, once again, as you say, as they progress, and they can become phenomenal. They can become really, really talented paramotor pilots doing that.
John didn't have the progression he had and the good head on the shoulders that he has, I would have had no interest in seeking out the instructor administrator rating.
Okay.
I chased it because he needs to be an instructor. And he's amazing.
I think that when it comes to paramotoring, the more of this conversation that we have, the more I'm realizing that it's a lot less to do with skill and it is to do with your mind. Like, when it comes to just being good at flying, a lot of it is just training your mind to make good choices.
It's PPG-2 test question.
Really?
Yep.
Well,
I don't know Fletch would always say, oh, that's on the test.
Really?
You got to meet Fletch someday. It's on the PPG-2, but there's a question. It's
it was like
your decisions, right?
Yeah,
good decision.
Good decision making, and we
that should be like in huge letters everywhere in the paramotoring world.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the danger of this sport, is that there are other folks who just want to do the fun stuff, right? And their mindset is, well, if somebody else can do it, I can do it too. Right. And so it's not necessarily the methodical progression and the meticulous nature of learning things incrementally. And it's more about, I'm just going to go and do the thing that I want to do. So I feel like there's kind of two camps that we see often, is the folks who are very safety conscious and thorough and meticulous, and they have intentional progression versus the folks who just want to go and
get to that,
throw the fun stuff.
Point. Yeah.
And it's a challenge. Like, you had the one you mentioned. I mean, when you have a student who is going to make choices that are outside of what you'd encourage and support, and to be good choices, does writing them off, you write them off. If you write them off, how are you going to sleep later when they make a decision? It has nothing to do with you, but that decision, you can be a good influence if you keep them somewhat in the fold.
Yeah.
And it's hard because them somewhat in the fold, man, it can suck a lot of life out of you.
Where do you feel your future is in paramotoring?
Well, for me personally, it's sort of a newfound experience for me to enjoy the sport. And I was at Glamis just a couple of days ago, and it was light, almost nil wind conditions, and I blew 2 launches, and I threw a full blown 2-year-old temper tantrum because I was being really hard on myself. And I also, we had just left the sea, and maybe mindset wasn't in the best place to do the work that I knew that I would need to do in order to get off the ground. It was going to require a lot of commitment to smooth application of power and running. And, and my first 2 attempts to take off, I don't know that I had the full commitment that I needed. And so I went immediately to beating myself up about it because I'm, here I am going for my 300th flight and I can't inflate my glider was, the story that I was telling myself. Now on the 3rd attempt, it all came together and I flew, and it was good to be in the air. And I think that my biggest personal mission is to be in a place where I feel that I've got the skills and ability and the confidence to be on top of my personal flying game and to feel like I can walk out on the field and not be in student mentality. I think for the last 3 years, I very much have put myself in that beginner's space, which is not a bad thing, because I think that everything that I've learned and all that I've developed in my skills is because of that beginner's mindset, because there was never a moment where I was like, I got this, I know everything. And my personal journey with flying will continue to evolve as I now settle into the comfort that is flying and enjoying flying without the anxiety that I was experiencing.
Right.
And I'm just excited to be in a place where I can start to take that in, where new locations are available, where, I feel like I can go to some place I've never been before and be confident in my skills.
Yeah.
And so I feel like my next sort of year, maybe the next year-long journey will be focusing on that and just finding my comfort in my skills.
Nice.
And being open to new experiences and enjoying flying in a different way.
Awesome. Do you think that paramotoring could be a lifelong thing for you, so long as you're physically capable?
Yeah, I would love that. Certainly. People have often asked if I want to become an instructor, and I don't know that I have the desire for it. I see what our instructors
You're instructing
take
right now.
on,
I mean,
and
you've provided a lot of lessons to people today.
Sure. And not in the practicality of talking people up and down.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
I have done a lot of work on the field with students in the way of kiting support and, laying out gliders and making sure that on flight days, we've got a really good flow with our students and our buddy pairs and, helping in that way.
Mm-hmm.
And I certainly have been involved in all other business facets of running the flight school.
Yeah.
But to actually become an instructor, I'm not sure is part of my journey. I've got my PPG2 and know that I have skills that I still need to develop in order to meet the standards of the PPG3. And I think that's a really good goal for right now.
Yeah.
And beyond that, I'm not sure what it looks like, but I intend to be in the sport for as long as it feels fun and exciting for me.
Yeah.
And I know that the way to do that and to maintain that is to stay on the path that I've been on. Being meticulous and being vigilant about things. And, I remember one of the things in my initial training with Noah was he says, when you come out of training, your safety and comfort bubble is this big. Now you can certainly throw yourself into an arena where you can blow that out, but you might get lucky and that's great, but that doesn't mean that that's your skill set. So everything that you should do should be about incremental growth of that comfort zone and that safety bubble so that you don't step so far outside of it that you find yourself in a situation that is outside of your skills and abilities. And so I've always looked at my training progression in that way of what's the next thing that I can do that I can challenge myself while not putting myself outside of my abilities.
Yeah. Noah is a really, really intelligent guy.
Yeah.
Who knows? Maybe he'll make a comeback and take another big role in the paramotoring community. I think it would certainly be in the best interest of the community.
Mm-hmm.
Hope to see him do it again.
Yeah.
As long as it's not at the expense of his podcast. His podcast is so good.
Yeah, he's an author. He wrote a book. Yeah, really.
Yeah.
I recorded with Noah as well. he purchased some land out here for his flight school, and I drove out there to Deming, New Mexico to meet up and gain some lessons. So if you haven't heard that podcast episode yet, make sure you check it out after this one.
What it comes back to me for again and again is community. And we've developed an amazing bunch of friends through this.
Yeah.
We had 18 of them come out from New England with us. We had friends come from Montana, from friends who live on the road,
Minnesota,
Pennsylvania, all came out to join us at the Sea this year. And it's just this amazing opportunity to gather with these people and the people we meet every year at the Sea. And I don't want to give that up. I've built friendships through our flight school and through our travels that just don't want to give up. So I guess I got to stay with this.
Yeah.
But I need to find a way to where it sucks less life. There's a lot about, this business and my other business and family and trying to keep all the balls in the air. It's a lot. But yeah, some of the friendships and the life change. I mean, the life change we get to support people on is pretty remarkable. And I don't see another world where I can affect people's lives as well. And through all of my struggles with dealing with, this past week, what's been a constant is a community of people who've been coming to support us. And these are people who witnessed the same thing we did. Mm-hmm. And still every one of them, whether they're there or not, we're here, we're family, we're here for you.
I think that you're exactly where you need to be, but I also am understanding that, sometimes life gets busy, and with the recent tragic event, like it can put your head in a very weird place. And hopefully once the dust settles, you'll have grown from the experience and it'll make you an even better instructor than you already are, for both of you.
I appreciate you taking time to have us here.
Yeah, of course. we were looking forward to it so much. Emily, David, thank you both very much. We love you guys.
We love you too.
Thank you.
Thrilled to be here. Thanks for having us.
Be sure to check out youcanflyppg.com to learn more about their flight school over there in Connecticut. And until next time, fly safe and see you soon.